Call the meeting to order of the monthly regularly scheduled Policy Advisory Committee for the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. And we'll open with the roster and attendance. So I'll go down the list. David Janis, I'm here, present. Renee Westelusk.
Here. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Renee. Yes, I can. We don't have I don't see West yet. I expect him to be here. Lyle Fisher. Lyle's here. Judy Decker.
Here.
Camille Anderson.
Here.
Thank you, Camille. Tim Carroll.
Here.
Regina Troglin.
Here.
And we have 4 non-voting members. Don Zadiba notified me that he was going to be absent this evening. Tom Bukowskis notified me that he was going to be absent this evening, although we have Emma attending for the BLM. She's not the official member, but she's taking notes for Tom. And John Kersey.
Here.
John's here, and Lorelei Oviatt. Not here and not online. And I see Carol Thomas Kiefer, the general manager, is also online. She's not a member either. So with that, we'll stand for the pledge. Please follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May be seated.
Here comes West.
Yep. West is approaching from the north.
Forecast says it's going to rain.
That will begin our agenda with open public comment for those items that are not on the agenda for anyone in the public to comment. Do we have any comments from those present? Do we have any comments from out in YouTube land? None noted. So we'll move. Oh, Renee, I'm sorry.
But she's not public. This is public comment time.
Renee, did you have a comment?
Yeah. I just want to let people know that I did come down with COVID on May 25th. And then a week later, I was feeling well enough and all my symptoms have dissipated. But then 3 days later, my symptoms came back and I was running a fever again. I was really sick. And it's been about a month, I figured from yesterday. And I'm still not 100%. I mean, I'm not, I got retested, let's see, it was the Tuesday after I started coming down with it again because the fever finally went away. But anyway, that was the weekend after I had been sick I had gotten it on the 25th. I was feeling well enough and had no symptoms pretty much other than residual cough, cold thing on June 1st. And then the symptoms came back. I ran a fever for 3 days. And then that next Tuesday, I got retested and then I was negative. But I just want to let people know the recovery isn't always very quickly. And I'm still feeling weak and I'm under a doctor's care, but it takes time to get over it. And not everybody snaps back. And you can relapse too, like I did. So I just wanted to caution people about protecting themselves from coming down with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. And I don't think, from the standpoint of this group, I don't think we were ever with you during any of those time periods. So there's no risk of exposure. With that, we'll move to item number 4, the minutes of the May PAC meeting for approval. I distributed them to everyone as everyone had a chance to read them. Do we have a motion?
I'll motion
I'll second.
And what was the motion?
to approve the minutes.
Thanks. Need to clarify.
ahead of me.
Okay, and Lyle
I'll
seconded
second
it. And do we have any discussion?
Yes, I mean,
You have discussion, Renee?
I have a question on the minutes because I haven't been able to attend in person. So last meeting, it was announced that Regina Troglin had passed out, I guess, an updated draft. So what does that mean? Is that her comments that she submitted, or did she make an updated draft of revising the engagement plan?
She did a draft of the C&E plan, and it should be on the website, the GA
Because I never
website.
got a copy of it. I didn't. know where
It was
you-
posted on the website.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
And if you don't have it or don't have access to it, I will send it to you. It's not going to be, we're going to reference that going into next week. So it won't really be very relevant for this evening's discussion. Okay, with that, do we have any more discussion? Okay, with that, we'll do a roll call vote. Dave Janis, aye. Renee Westerlusk,
Aye.
West Katzenstein,
Aye.
Lyle Fisher,
Aye.
Judy Decker,
Aye.
Camille Anderson,
Aye.
Tim Carroll,
Aye.
Regina Troglin,
Aye.
John Kersey. Oh, that's right. Thanks for reminding me. I promoted you, or that's not a promotion. It's still equal member. Okay, with that, the minutes are approved as submitted, and we'll go on to the meat of tonight's meeting, and the sole purpose we're here this evening really is to go over the ad hoc subcommittee recommendations and develop the full PAC committee recommendations that we want to move forward with. Once we do that and agree on what our outlook is as a committee, having agreed on all those things necessary during for the GA to communicate and how they do it, how we would recommend that, we would then look at those changes from those that are necessary to the C&E plan. The objective would be to take that on for next meeting, and we'll talk about the options on how to deal with that. So, with regards to the policy subcommittee, the ad hoc policy or ad hoc C&E recommendations subcommittee, Regina Troglin, West Katzenstein, and myself were members. And what we did was we took the 4 common areas that we all expanded on at the last meeting, and I hope everyone was able to see the PAC report and perhaps witness the PAC report on the video from the last GA meeting, where I summarized those at length for the GA board. And what our subcommittee did was take those starting 4 areas and build one level lower to define exactly what we meant by those sub-elements within each one of the 4 areas. So you'll see it goes down maybe 1 or 2 more layers as we work through items 1 through 4, which were the common areas that we all agreed on last time. And it's lengthy. It's not that lengthy. It's very simplified because it helps clarify. We wanted to have enough words and verbiage to clarify the intent, not just for this committee, but in particular, the subcommittee report as it's modified by this group will be what goes forward in a package to the GA board itself, so that it would provide the backup information to a PAC report on the full recommendations. So with that, I will summarize briefly the top level of what the committee agreed on. Those four common factors, number one was the key focus elements for the implementation of the execution phase of the GSP, which was the primary requirement out of DWR's comments in their recommended corrective actions. They were focused in two areas. One, that the GSP was written for the development period, and the C&E plan was written to focus on that. And now we were in the implementation period, and several things were called out to change in the plan itself, and DWR expects them to change. And they're looking for how the C&E plan, the communications and engagement from the Groundwater Authority should need to be changed or modified based on the implementation. The second focus was on stakeholders, and it was both the stakeholders that we have recognized already in the basin and focusing on some disadvantaged or economic, et cetera, folks that were defined in the water code. So we looked at those four elements and we said, these are the most important things that we as a group, we as a PAC, commonly had in our inputs, and then we deeper dove on them within the subcommittee. So the first was an integrated, comprehensive schedule linking projects, tasks, budget, responsible parties, planned and execution progress, and a financial summary. And those would be on a monthly basis. Then there might be deep dives, either quarterly or semi-annual, targeted public workshops also. Those targeted could be based on stakeholder or other factors, but certainly projects and management actions, which are the key items out of the GSP. Second item was provide a summary statement of fact sheet about the overall purpose and objectives for the GSP and the link to achieving sustainability in the basins. Those factors are the origins of SGMA and the IWVGA, including the legal authority. GSP purpose, summary, overview. How the GSP helps achieve sustainability, or GSP development funding sources, including the potential and existence of fees. Number three, the GSP implementation summary, schedule, cost, and funding sources, including fees identified. And item four, small Roman numeral 4, statement of fact, noting the existing legal actions disputing the GSP and the legal requirement for the Groundwater Authority to execute the GSP until they are resolved. Item C, provide a summary statement of fact sheet addressing the below listed items. They are what we're doing in general here is we are identifying what we believe the key fact sheets are needed for the Groundwater Authority to present, and we've given them a priority ranking. You'll see P1 to P3, and that's roughly an equal time frame based. It was based on when the time frame they would be needed and the foundation that they might provide to the public for getting understanding. And we'll talk about more in common factor number 2, what those are and why. But this is simply so far in B and C, prioritizing and definitizing what we felt was needed to be addressed in these fact sheets that would be in layman's terms and fairly concise. Item D is a continuation of the same, but it's really the focus on the projects and management actions within the GSP. It cites each one of them that's cited in the GSP. I won't read them. You should all be familiar with them. And then it adds at the bottom the recommended corrective actions so the public is kept appraised of where we stand with those recommended corrective actions that are required to be implemented by the next GSP 5-year update, which is in about 2.5 years. Item number E is a little bit more definition on the fact sheets themselves, provide all key element fact sheets in concise layman's terms, but include references or links for more extensive information and definition of terms. Where they need to be longer because they're complex, and many of these subjects are, provide an executive summary that then links to the elements that it covers. Big item number 2, increased public engagement and methods of engagement. There were a couple big things in here, and in particular, the social media needed a rather lengthy explanation of what we were proposing, because that was one of the areas of concern in the GA board if you watched the GA meeting. So increased public engagement and methods of engagement. Number 1, or A, focus on stakeholder engagement and communication focused on the stakeholders. So the individual stakeholders and the stakeholders as a whole. 1, the general public, all stakeholders just becoming aware or searching for information, and then each stakeholder group, whether it's a water user group that we all represent, or it's a different subset group in the valley, the economic disadvantage perhaps. The second one, item B, is methods of engagement, and we thought we'd define the central factor that we thought was needed was the improvement of the website, and the website be the repository and the central source for all information, and what everything else that the GA does points back to certified information, designated information, legally reviewed information, et cetera, on that website. So it should update and improve the focus on the website, designed around simplicity and providing communication and engagement information to the public for easier online search and information. The website should appear prominently when stakeholders execute searches, and to do that, it would take an appropriate website strategy and essential keywords identified and used. That's more detail than we need to discuss right now, but it was clarifying as to what we meant by that statement. The website would be recognized as reliable and complete source of accurate information essential to the activities of the Groundwater Authority. And any social media that we used would direct stakeholders to the website. On communication specifically, there were 4 subsets to that. Provide relevant top-level introductory material in response to searches by stakeholders and the public. Easy navigation to frequently asked questions, including fact sheets and instruction regarding how to address questions not yet covered by the frequently asked questions. Number 2, links to more detailed information. The details should already exist in the GSP and other documents, but as many have pointed out, sometimes it's in engineering terms, legal terms, bureaucratic terms, et cetera. Post a current overview of the integrated schedule that we talked about before. It would tie together the background, historical, ongoing, and planned activities. Provide a summary. It would also provide a summary description of tasks and expenditures with links to greater detail. Number 3, under communication, alert stakeholders to ongoing and planned activities that are opportunities for engagement. And again, those are the management actions and projects defined by the GSP and the recommended corrective actions per the DWR approval document. Number 4, provide all these key element fact sheets online and also at public meetings and via proactive media push-out. Item number 4 under methods of engagement would be talking about specific public engagement. And when we say public engagement, previous to this, we're talking about information and their ability to find information, the public or stakeholders. Now we're talking about how we the GA, would proactively go out and engage the public to encourage their involvement and coming to the website or other places to gather information. So, number one, under public engagement, provide forums for engagement on key subject projects and management actions. So that would be, for example, planned public meetings, quarterly or semi-annual, and targeted public workshops. Second would be potential online discussions. Number three, stakeholder targeted communications fully available to the general public. This, we gave an example of this that we called out in here and we mentioned at the last GA meeting, and this group has discussed. When we say stakeholder targeted general communication, we didn't consider it perhaps down to this level when we developed the original C&E plan, but it's characterized by recognizing who the groupings of stakeholders are and what might be their most effective means of getting communication to them. We all know the number one challenge in today's environment with the media as fragmented as it is, the internet as fragmented as it is, and people, there are very few common sources anymore. So how would we target that? And for example, the general store in Inyakern was brought up as a great way to get to the folks in the Inyakern area, not just Inyakern residents, CSD, farmers, et cetera. It's a lot of the well owners, the domestic well owners, et cetera, that frequent that general store, and that's a function of communication in that community. There is a similar equivalent in Trona, which we all know is a disadvantaged community and didn't have representation perhaps on this committee for the first 3 years. And so I think, is it the TIS store?
Correct, yeah, it's Toronto Industrial Supply. It may get a new name, but maybe not.
Yep, but there are challenges in, we cover 3 counties and very disparate communities, and very different folks live out here, from folks that are relatively urban to folks that are close to hermits and everything in between, and prefer to be that way, and that's their right. But we're trying to do our best in seeking to make contact and getting their interest piqued so that they can become aware if they haven't been and participate if they haven't been. Now, social media, and this is a lengthy one, but we thought it needed some increased explanation for what we were proposing. So item number 1 under social media, all social media posts will link back either in the description or actual post to the GA website, which is our central repository. And that website will contain only approved and already public information. Number 2, the use of social media methods is for both broadcasting the information and encouraging engagement with the stakeholders and communities to which the GA serves. And the subsets of that are, for example, text, photo posts to relay information and to publish to a wider audience using official Facebook, for example, Instagram and Twitter pages. And at this point, that is broadcast information. That is not two-way at this point. We'll get there. Broadcast the information to a wider audience who have not seen it or been to a GA meeting. So that's an additional way to get information out there to all these folks who get information from various and separate sources. The second item under that is the majority of the posts, these push posts, will have comments disabled on them, but may potentially also have the share option disabled if it's deemed necessary, because there is a certain fear that this group expressed and the GA board itself expressed about getting into dialogue exchanges that go down rabbit holes, to be polite. And so, okay, that's a start into the reason we're going to spend a little time on this is so you understand what the recommendations of the committee are. And the committee struggled with this in coming to agreement on what we think is reasonable. under this also, the video formats such as YouTube, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and TV, as well as short format contents on all three platforms, would be used to show infographics based on fact sheets and published information on the website. Descriptions would have links to the information in the website, so these would be again pushed and approved, and they would link back to information on the website. And it will be, or should be, a fun and engaging way for any individuals, young or old, to intake the information, especially technical information, in short format. And this is often done. We've seen the city, for example, is using TikTok. Most of this group, I think, for various sources or various purposes, uses YouTube, or there are other similar venues at all that provide a way of, again, pushing the information and pointing back to the website. Number 3, under social media, the proposal for active engagement is for a 3-phase trial run with just Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages to share the fact sheets and other information on the website. That's no engagement beyond posting the information. So at this point, it's phase 1 is still this one-way broadcast information, but you're doing it through a variety of online methods. If the trial run on all 3 of these goes well, the next phase would be the infographics, so those video short forms and social media to also go out there. Again, it's push only, one way only. If both of those prior phases have been successful with minimal issues, then we would recommend going to an official Facebook group, establish a group that folks would sign up for additional engagement, and it would go live, and we would describe that below. And there's a lengthy description right below this. Number 4, controlled active engagement is not necessary, but a trial is recommended via an official Facebook group, which would be moderated by the proposed committee that we're going to bring forward in common factor number 4. A, moderation tools for Facebook groups have become invaluable, allowing moderators to approve or verify not just membership, but comments and posts before, if you're allowing posts, before they go live on the group's page. B, engagement with the group would be to accumulate questions and concerns from the community. If the information is already available on the website, then a link would be shared in the comments with the individual to send them to the proper location on that approved website. If the individual's question is more detailed or requires a response not available from the documentation on the website, the moderators would then be instructed to reach out to the GA or the general manager before responding. 3, no personal responses by moderators would be allowed. And number 4, all questions and concerns throughout the month would be gathered and relayed at the end of month to the Groundwater Authority Board itself and the staff, obviously, so that the board is aware of where are the questions coming from, what informational gaps are they hiding. So at this point, this item number 3, this 3rd phase, would be starting a 2-way dialogue, but would be very controlled and responsive. It wouldn't be any kind of personal responses. Again, it's always answering or pointing folks to where the answers are located and what's approved previously. I'll go to number 3, the common factor number 3, because it contains the volunteer group, or the group we talked about as moderators potentially within it. So big group, big recommendation number 3, employ or assign a communication and engagement director or lead. That would be this person or persons, it probably has to be a person, would oversee and be responsible for and accountable for all of the C&E outreach. So they're the responsible and accountable agent. They would provide guidelines to the, oops, I have an extra pronoun there. Not pronoun, but that's, never mind. To be for responsive communication in a litigation environment. So they'd be cautious about that. They're aware that we're in a litigation environment, the Groundwater Authority is. And in fact, that's one of the reasons for controlling and referencing all links to the approved information. So the volunteer-based committee that would assist the C&E lead would post web links, meeting information, et cetera, on all social media platforms that we've discussed. They would be responsible to coordinate design and video ideas with appropriate individuals, and potentially in coordination with PAC and TAC members, create and design fact sheets and other visual communication methods that, of course, would be going through the GA staff per the process, the usual process, prior to getting that blessing to go on the website. Gather information on gaps in communication and relay those to the staff and board each month by observing comment sections and other social media groups. Last under this is this group could coordinate with local schools to get younger generations involved in the content creation for the social media pages and video formats. Many of our children are getting exposed to this issue in a third-party way, and it's not always positive. And I think there's evidence that a lot of this, it would be good to get them involved and aware of what's going on in their community. Most of us have commented on there's a need for more civics and civic awareness, and that would perhaps help it. Item number 4 is what we've signed off, or what we've agreed that we're going to tackle out of next month's for next month's meeting, which is, if we agree on these 3 above, what key sections and approaches and methods in the 7 other plans approved by DWR, supplemented by what the plan that Regina submitted, what would we recommend be documented fully in a formal change to the C&E plan itself. And I envision that as an upper, it wouldn't be anything near the detail that we've talked about here, but it would be the top levels of those, for example. In those things that we've talked about here that haven't been mentioned in the current C&E plan, and there are a few of those. So with that, I'll open it. First for comment, is there comments from any other member of the committee? Any other member of the committee have a comment?
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Did the committee discuss, I'm not on, did the committee discuss the cost of this proposed project? From what I'm estimating, from what I've read, it's between $150,000 and $300,000 to do all the things that you have listed here.
We didn't discuss cost, other than the fact that other than having a person defined to lead this up full-time, most of it would be volunteer, and efforts that and we've had volunteers from this committee and the PAC to do some of it. We didn't see it achieving anywhere near that cost.
Well, I guess I do, having worked with public agencies in the past. It's very complicated. It's very detailed. I feel that it's way too detailed at this time. For those of you who watched or attended the June Groundwater Authority meeting, Carol Kiefer Thomas requested, and the board approved, assigning $60,000 from either or both the shallow well mitigation plan or the replenishment fee account to begin the process that staff picked up on that we discussed at earlier meetings. That is, I believe, Carol, you can correct me if I'm incorrect, This will mostly be for starting an update of the website and for looking at developing what Commander Longbottom called a POAM. And developing, and you have it in here, but developing a detailed schedule of the proposed management and action items that are listed in the GSP, who's going to do them, how much they're going to cost, what's the timeline associated with them, and developing not new, but a greatly updated website is going to take a lot of time. There are 2 staff people. I do not think either one of these items are projects that should be done by either this committee or the TAC. We can give input, and that was in fact our assigned job, was to give input. I think we should let staff and encourage them to work on these 2 items because they're both of utmost importance. Let them work on them, see how far they can get, see what they can do, and review it. And then proceed to look at the details in this that you have written down here. That's what I think. And I think cost, whether you talked about it or you didn't talk about it, we all know that cost is an absolutely vital item to look at. The GA board doesn't have any money, and if you recall at the last board meeting, Deputy Counsel for the county, Phil Hall, was there in person and got up and said, the GA does not have a general fund, that a general fund is from tax dollars.
It's from fees.
That-
Or the general
I believe
fund,
it-
general fund is from tax, but the groundwater authority is funded from fees.
The
That's
groundwater
correct.
authority is funded from fees, and when the GSP was developed and the fees were developed, it was anticipated that all those who were thought to be going to pay into the fees would pay, and they have not. The only entity paying replenishment fees at this time are the customers of the Indian Wells Valley Water District, as far as I know. Those fees are not insignificant. We are living in a time, unfortunately, where the economics of the country is going crazy. And I think many people are very concerned about whether they're going to be able to afford going to the grocery store or putting gas in their car. So I would not recommend that the GA increase fees at this time for those same people who are already paying them. And I guess those are my comments, because you did mention, I did make a mistake on my one-page document. You have mentioned the many lawsuits and the groundwater adjudication. Until those issues are solved in a court of law, the basic pumping of this valley is going to be pretty much like it is now.
The GA has the obligation, and I referred to it in there, the responsibility and the authority to execute the GSP, and to the extent that that could change pumping in the valley, it will. The last few adjudications have been almost 20 years long.
I realize that we won't be here to see the end result, David.
I'm trying. You are too.
But the adjudication is something the Water District should have done 40 years ago, unfortunately. Had they done so, we would not be in this difficult water situation that we are in today.
You can go back 40 years with that comment, but do we have comments from other members? Or let me ask the subcommittee members to respond to some of this, and then I'd like to ask Carol to comment on the cost estimate. Wes, do you have any comment?
Yes, I think, Judy, you'll find that the main items on this are the website, the POAM. We chose not to call it a POAM because.
I understand.
And so I think the main difference here, that there's certainly a cost question, but I think the main thing on here that's maybe different than was included in your comments is the social media. And when
Well, I didn't even address social media in my comments today. I think you all pretty much know how I feel about it. My thought is, if you look back, and most of us have attended all the meetings, or most of the meetings of the GA and the formation of the PAC and the TAC, and even meetings before then, if you think about it, for instance, in the last couple of years, how much has changed? A year ago, we didn't have a groundwater adjudication, for instance. We didn't have a state ruling that starting January 1st, you can only use 55 gallons per day per person, a state law passed by the governor. I appreciate what you've done, especially you, West. You're a glutton for punishment.
I want to make a comment that all three of us were gluttons here.
But you were on both committees. There is, I feel, too much detail here. I feel that the staff ought to get started on this, see where it goes. If it goes well, they can go down and look at what you have, and maybe they'll say that item 3 ought to come before item 2 and change it accordingly. It's really not up to the PAC to give them so much detail, I don't think. I think as time goes on and we see how the website works out, for instance, or the, whatever you want to call it, POAM, works out, we can tell them whatever we feel might be necessary. For instance, they forgot to put the website improvements on their POAM, so we don't really know how long it will take or how much it will cost, and things like that.
Yeah, we have talked about that we might have a more simplified version of this to present to the GA. So I think now the thing to talk about is the content. And, lots of times I think the best way to proceed is maybe dive a little bit deeper and then back off and provide maybe an executive summary that's more meant for the GA. So once again, I think all your main points are covered here, but maybe in more detail than you're comfortable with. But if we...
Absolutely, because, things are going to change, whether we like them or not. Whether they're good or not, they're simply going to change. And so having a detailed recipe like this, because that's kind of what it is, it's like a recipe. And if your recipe says put 2 cups of onions in it, and you do that, but then you find out that everybody who's going to eat it is allergic to onions, you've made a big mistake. So that's a silly comparison, but there it is. I think starting out with just the 2 subject topics that actually Carol brought up herself and see how they go is great. We don't have to wait till they're ended. We see how they go. Then if it looks like, for instance, the improved website. You find out you're getting lots of hits on it, and you're getting lots of questions, you're getting more activity from people. Then you can go back to that website and add things. That's pretty, I don't see that as a big problem. You might want to add something that's not even listed.
Well, that's what in our discussions, we went through quite a bit in the discussion itself. But one thing that's been noted, especially over the last couple of years, is when you don't get more detailed, when you don't lay out a grand plan, we're going to have a bunch of holes and we're going to have a bunch of missed opportunities, where right now we have the opportunity to fix a lot. Fix part of the engagement plan, which is what we were tasked to do. And although cost, of course, naturally would factor into things, and I believe we did discuss it very briefly, which is why we leaned heavily towards a volunteer type of a scenario with oversight from the board, the general manager, staff, to free up some of their time, because there are individuals who are willing to step up and step forward to take over some of that without needing to be paid, because these things do matter to individuals in the community.
I think that's very admirable. However, we're dealing with a technical subject, and that is the groundwater hydrology of this valley and the rules and regulations that have been imposed by the state, by the various governing entities that serve water, like the CSD and the Indian Wells Valley Water District, and the facility in Trona, the Trona Domestic Water Supply Company. I don't think volunteers, however well-intended they might be, are the right people to do that job.
My only comment back is I would highly disagree.
Well,
Highly
then we disagree. For instance, on your list, you have the groundwater model and all the different things under that. That is a highly technical subject. It's something that a groundwater hydrologist or other scientifically trained person should do. Not one of us.
Yeah, I expect for the groundwater model, we'd have to be very careful that we did that accurately. But the groundwater model is an essential tool in where we are now and where we're going in the future. The fact that it's been calibrated and we can go back 50 years in time and predict where we are today, the community needs to know that it's out there. It's going to lead us into the future as things change. And that to me, personally, that is an essential part that basically puts the work of the Groundwater Authority heads and shoulders above all the other discussions that are floating around the community that are not necessarily technically accurate. So I agree with you, that needs to be cleanly and accurately expressed. It needs to have, and we've made it pretty clear that we don't run amok on this stuff. It is approved and blessed by the appropriate people, which might be the TAC in this case.
I don't know how you're going to get something like the comprehensive groundwater model in verbiage that the general public would understand. When you talk to people about their water supply and they tell you it comes from the well down the street and they go outside, this is in one of the tracks here in Ridgegrass, and you say, well, I didn't know there was a well down there, where is it? And they point to the fire hydrant. You aren't going to get that person to understand the comprehensive groundwater model, even in its simplest terms.
But there are a lot of technically educated people in this valley that would understand it, and that today or don't understand it or are questioning it. I think as a member of the committee and of the subcommittee and a member of this committee, I believe the detail that we've taken it down to is necessary for the clarity and the focus on what we think is really needed with regards to communications. And we've given them priority 1, 2, and 3 to help with that priority issue. And the staff and the GA, having this complete set of recommendations that we will modify as seen fit tonight, they're going to pick and choose what they want to do and what resonates with them and what they can do. That priority order helps them very much. I think the majority of it for technical issues will in fact be the staff, but they might authorize a group of small volunteers, perhaps let's talk about the model, the TAC to draft it, and then they would fully approve a final version of it that could come out. And so there are levels of expertise that could be applied to each one of these tasks in their priority. Many of the priority 1 tasks are merely simplified extracts of the GSP itself. Those are taken from the chapters of the GSP. And the task would be to put those in layman's terms. So I see it as, let's not voluntarily restrict ourselves from what we think is really necessary to communicate because of cost or are wanting to self-limit it. Let's tell them what is needed, what the priorities are, and then let them select within the limitations they have for budget, et cetera. And funding-wise, those fees, portions of each one of those fees, as was clarified at that GA meeting, are designated for stakeholder and public outreach. That communication engagement is a requirement to be executed under the fee. So, Carol, I would like you to, having taken on this conversation so far, and what we said about the volunteer offers, both on PAC and TAC and others from the community, perhaps, the way you interpret this, you came up with a $60K figure that you proposed to the GA itself, and that was approved at the last meeting. What do you think you're hearing, and what are your estimates of what might be doable in this endeavor?
Well, first of all, let me thank the subcommittee for putting together such a detailed, comprehensive list. Wow, that's amazing, and you have excellent recommendations. Now, the report that I provided at the June board meeting and the budget that I came up with was an initial budget, and it was intended to just cover the remainder of this year, 2022, using available funds. We didn't want to tax the budget. We wanted to draw from budget items that were already accounted for, but where we felt that money wasn't necessarily going to be used or could be deferred to next year. So we wanted this to be as easy on the budget as we could make it. And I identified several activities that I thought we could start to undertake, and I felt that those were consistent with a lot of the recommendations that the PAC was making. That included putting together some informational mailers, developing a variety of fact sheets, improving our website and expanding the information that's available to folks online through the website. I also want to start doing like an electronic newsletter or an e-blast, either monthly after board meetings or even more frequently as needed. The social media presence was also included. Dave, you remember that was a bit controversial. We had a lot of discussion, and we didn't exactly set it aside, but we said that it would require more detail as for what we were going to do before we would go forward with it. And then the final item that I listed was public workshops. So this was just really to see what we could get started over the next 6 months left in this year, recognizing that we really have a need, that we have a plan that's been approved now. We've got a grant. We're starting implementation of our plan. And we really want our community to understand what's going on. We want the community to hear not only more about what the authority is doing, but more about our projects, more about why they're needed. to better understand the details of what we're doing and why, exactly why. So that said, I think, my recommendation was maybe a small summary of some of the things, or a small subset maybe of some of the items that are already in your more comprehensive list. And Judy makes an excellent point, and I have to agree with her to a large extent. If we were going to try to do everything that's in there, that could potentially cost a lot of money. Now, we don't want to burden our community, right? I mean, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make a sustainable groundwater basin for years to come, but it's not sustainable if people can't afford it. So our communications plan has to fit into that sustainability goal. And to that end, we're wanting to maybe ease into it, start with the things that we think are most important, maybe the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak. Try to reach out to the community, get information out as best we can, and then I think we can look at some of those other activities and see where we can expand on them, or where we can move into some of the additional recommendations as best we can. I think having some volunteers would be great, especially when it comes to person-to-person outreach, events in the community, even talking to students, going to maybe some of the classrooms or service groups, that sort of thing. We don't have a lot of people available in the community to speak on our behalf, and I'm not very local, so it's difficult for me to get there, on a frequent basis to do that sort of thing. So having volunteers to help us in that respect would be awesome. I think having some assistance maybe with, especially in reviewing some of the things we come up with that we want to do, is also really helpful. But I guess to circle back to the cost, again, my budget was $60,000, not a lot of money, but it is only projected to cover the next 6 months. We do see a lot more work to come. We've got a lot more that we're going to be doing. We've got our project is just starting to get off the ground. So we have a lot of community engagement ahead of us. And I think we're going to look forward to the opportunity to expand on this short list of activities that I have, and look at what you're proposing, what your group ultimately proposes to the board, and see what we can do with that. And always keeping in mind the cost, because we do want to keep our costs down and keep all of this as reasonable and sensible as we can. I definitely personally take that seriously.
Thanks, Carol. And what I summarized earlier, maybe I didn't say it as completely as I said it in our subcommittee. West and Regina, you can chime in on this, is that what we would report out in the PAC report for the next meeting would be a top-level summary of this. So it would be a slight modification to what we reported out at the last meeting. So it's at that level of detail that we would plan reporting out, but we would have the attached report to provide the clarity and definition, as well as the priority P1, P2, P3, et cetera, for what we want to take on. And recognizing that some of the requirements or the recommended corrective action specifically talked about how we would engage with some of these stakeholders and make folks more aware. It's relevant to that level of detail being provided. But again, that goes to the staff and the GA itself with that top-level document, much like an executive summary that might be a page or two. And I think we did it in a page last time on the GA report, no longer than a page and a half. And then we have this backup information. Particularly lengthy is the description of what we were trying to do with social media, directly addressing that issue that was raised in this group and at the Groundwater Authority itself. So a lot of the information provided, almost a page and a half on that subject, is specifically to talk about how you would implement it, because not everyone is social media moderation or moderator familiar with how it works and how you can control it and what limits you can put on it. And I tried to explain that in the GA, that you can control it very much and keep it from being what, in my opinion, of much social media is, a sewer. And I've said that, and but I am advocating for us approaching some level of this and having the detailed explanations so folks can understand. And I think that also, Wes, you mentioned at the start that that's a way to do it, that because we talked specifically about this concern in the committee, is how do we capture succinctly, and we said the report would do that, but this would provide the clarity and the background information for a deeper dive and include the prioritization. That's why we prioritized the subjects for the staff to take on, and then the committee or the Groundwater Authority and the staff can choose what they accept as a recommendation, or what they don't, or what they accept as a minimum level and they aspire to a level above that. Virginia, you have any comments?
No, I think you said it perfectly, Dave.
West?
Yeah, just two thoughts come to mind. I think if you roll this up to the main, if you summarize this in a paragraph, you're going to find we're saying, with the exception potentially of social media, we're basically doing what Judy recommends and what Carol says she's going to undertake. And this may add more detail to it. So if we roll it up, I think you would be pleased. Now, regarding social media, I've stayed away from it like the plague. My perception is it's people, we've gone from having written documents to newspapers to phrases, and my perception was social media is dealing at the grunt level. People kind of grunting at each other, not even making a full phrase or a sentence. And then it runs off down a rabbit hole, and crazy people are having the day, and folks are walking around town mad based on information that's incomplete and wrong. And why would we ever want to do that? And but then when we had our discussions, and with Regina's input on this, and she's had a lot of experience, and the language that's one reason we chose to make the section on social media rather long. We want to make it clear that we're not going to be in there fighting with the grunts and the phrases. It's going to be under our terms, and it's going to be controlled, and it's going to be linked tightly to a website that should be complete and understandable. So I came away feeling that we do need the social media presence under the terms that we've come up with, and that if we don't do that in today's world, but by the way, we'll try to deal with more than just grunts and short phrases. If we don't do that, we're really missing a big bet. But we want to keep it all pointed back to the website. And if I remember right, in fact, Stetson has put in place a data management system. And I would think that would even be another level of link that could occur when people go looking for information. So the website has to have the simplified information that's not there yet, but it is largely there in the GSP introductory material. So that's kind of why the detail under this first page that is there, suggesting ways that a person can go to the website and feel welcomed in and have introductory material that will lead them where they need to go. And then the social media points to the website. Go ahead, Judy, I'm sorry.
If the wrong information is put on social media, it will be disastrous.
Correct. And if you read this carefully, you'll see.
That's why we have the check in place. These two beat me up pretty hard for about an hour and a half.
We were not
to vet all of it. I had about 3 pages worth of notes on social media by itself, and they hammered out literally every negative point you could possibly come up with.
I would like to make 2 points. Mm-hmm. Actually, it has to do with what Carol said. The first one is she mentioned she didn't mention the money, but the $7.5 million that the state has granted us to do the planning of a pipeline from the Indian Wells Valley to the AVAC turnout at California City. The Water District is against that. They just passed at their last board meeting their general plan, which states they will communicate with DWP, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, about imported water. So right off the bat, you have a conflict between the major water purveyor in the valley and the GA. I just wanted to point that out to you.
Well, to go to your point, and Dave and Wes both brought it up, misinformation on social media is a massive problem in just culture in general throughout the entire globe. So keeping that in mind, that's why, we came up with the plan of the only thing that gets published on the social media pages or in the infographics is information that's gone through the TAC. If it's technical information, has been fully approved, has been fully vetted. No personal comments whatsoever would take place. And there's ways of enforcing that, quite stringent ways, on all of the major platforms at this point because of the issues with misinformation. So, I don't disagree with you. It is a concern.
The other thing, when I brought up cost, the cost of a water right in this period of drought that we are in is astronomical. Every penny that is given to the replenishment fee fund should be kept there because the cost is astronomical for the water right that does not include any water. I hope everyone sitting at this table understands that. The cost of imported water is going to be excessive. It will be cheaper to drink fine wine, I'm sure, by the time we get it. Here we have a grant for $7.5 million, and it doesn't include one stick of pipeline. It's just for the plan. Think about it. Be very careful what you do with the replenishment fee money.
Other members of the committee, a few of us have dominated, so Tim, you have?
I was going to when you give me a chance here. I'm going to start backwards too, because I'm going to start with social media. I was very reluctant to endorse it, but I've read what you have here, and with safeguards that you are, and I know you are the ones that, yes, I feel much more comfortable with it. Sure, you're going to have to watch it, monitor it, look, whatever how you do it. I can't help looking at you. It drives me nuts. So anyhow, I'm much more comfortable with basically after seeing what you guys have put together. And I also like to commend all three of you for all of this. This is there's a lot of stuff here. Yeah, sure. Is it too detailed for the board? Yeah, probably. But you've got the detail down now, and you got it prioritized. Now it's useful in the future. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But having everything back to the social media, tying it back to the website, that is good. You need that. That will work for the social media stuff as far as I'm concerned. But of course, of major importance is improvements to the website. That's like number one. Actually, number two, a comprehensive schedule, POAM, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. No one knows what the GA is doing because you find out, when you see their agenda, maybe, So no one ever knows what the heck's going on. And they need a detailed schedule showing what stuff is, why it's being done, how much it's going to cost, and when it's going to be done, kind of thing. So we definitely need a good comprehensive schedule and the website updated. And the rest of this, I think, will start falling in place, but I don't know. Okay, that's for now.
Other comments?
One of the things I find when I try to read some of the information is all the terminology. One thing I'd like to suggest is we get a comprehensive glossary of terms that can go with, all of the discussion. The other thing is, it's hard to communicate information if some of that information is subject to change. So, we do think, some of the things are facts that aren't going to change, but, how we work on the problems are subject to, ongoing discussion and litigation. And, so I'm going to stop myself there because I will keep talking.
John? Renee?
Yeah, I have some comments. I agree with a lot of what Judy has said. I think that one thing that I think is that schedule that you're talking about, posting an overview integrated schedule with tasks and expenditures. I think that should be like on the homepage of the GA's website so people could immediately see what's going on. I think it's a really good idea. It just doesn't belong in the plan. It needs to be out there. The other things I have huge reservations about the cost. I'm glad to hear Carol has a short list. Carol Thomas Kiefer, I totally support her info outreach short list to get started. And I guess I'm really concerned about the cost. I don't know how we're going to afford a lot of this that's here. I don't, it depends on the volunteers. As far as volunteers go, that's great, but a lot of times volunteers don't get projects done on time. And so things get delayed, whereas if you're paying someone to get some of this done, you get it more quickly because they're earning a paycheck and they want to do a good job at their job that they've been hired for. And I still have strong reservations about doing social media because I took in strong consideration what Director Vallejo at the last Groundwater Authority meeting, and he's works for Inyo County and he's had a lot of experience, and they said they had to shut down part of their social media because they just got terrible, awful comments and stuff. And he was really against it. And I don't know if we should take on social media right away. And then I know of 2 hackings that have occurred on Facebook pages. Although these have happened in the past, I don't know what Facebook does now to stop hackings, but some of these hackings went on for a long time before Facebook would respond. And the other thing is you can't just have a volunteer in charge of these social media. You have to have somebody really experienced, and we need cybersecurity on this. Somebody that is, I think you'd almost have to have a paid person to do the social media, and to also it's constant monitoring too, because even if you don't have that, if you just have a one-way, I worry about the social media portal or whatever that the GA would have could get hacked, and somebody could post some scathing, terrible stuff right on the social media page. So I know you want to engage more people in the community, but I like the idea of expanding the web page, the website, and doing the electronic newsletter, because I know that works really well. an organization I was receiving electronic newsletters from worked extremely well, and they had a huge email database, and they called it, they would do email blasts, and I thought it was very effective. And I like the idea of the workshops and also doing the fact sheets. I think you should start out with basic stuff like Carol has outlined, because I'm just worried about having to fork out large amounts of money for communication at the expense of funding, making sure we spend every penny on getting the projects implemented for the GSP. And I think that's most of my comments. And I appreciate all the work that the subcommittee did. You did an excellent job. But as far as the social media, I just want to emphasize again, unless you can prove to me that the one-way thing is ironclad and they can't hack into it and post some terrible stuff, because I've heard of businesses ruined because somebody hacked their social media site, and it took a while. You have to have the know-how. In one case, I heard they had to take down the whole website. And my opinion is you have to have the expertise to react to something like that, a security issue. And I don't want any more work created. I worry about the burden. Right now, we have 2 staff people working for the GA. You know, it sounds to me like we'd have to have a 3rd person, and that's going to get quite expensive. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Camille?
Okay, so I liked that you guys went into a lot of detail. I thank you for all the work that you did in putting it together. For me, it's always easier to go from detail to more general. It's my understanding, Dave, that when you put it together for the GA, you're going to do a top level, not with every single little bullet point detail in there as a recommendation, just as guidelines. Is that correct? So
what we had been thinking of was to do the report summary, which would be similar to what we presented at the last Groundwater Authority meeting, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was about 1 page.
Right, okay.
So it's a level up or 2 up of what we presented, but we thought that this report, or a modified version of it, would stand as the more detail that you could draw from to get a clear understanding and prioritization of what we recommended. So we would do both. We'd have the executive summary that would highlight them. Then we have the explanation, in particular for social media, the explanation of what we were really intending and the controls that would be put on it, and that only phase 3, that end potential, is the only place that the 2-way comes in. It's at that phase 3.
Right.
So we would capture both, and that was what I was going to see if we had general agreement from the committee that approach for the PAC report being the summary, and then augment it by the more detailed report, which we may modify, because I think we left one thing off. I thought we had it in here, but we didn't. For example, we didn't have the email list for like the blast that Carol referred to, and it was in one of the previous versions. So somewhere we left off that under communication methods, that solicit and maintain an email list for pushing out. That was part of the push out all the media. That is the primary focus of this whole recommendation, is to get things out there, push it out, and then only in that tertiary level of social media as a method for more engagement in the internet universe does that phase 3 thing come in. But the other recommendations for targeted stakeholder meetings to get this out, certain sheets available at every GA meeting, that's all part of it.
And I like that as a group of suggestions. That way, the GA can pick and choose. I would not expect them to decide to do everything on this list or even at the frequency that it's suggested. Maybe, for example, on one of the things, you had a deep dive on a quarterly, semi-annual basis. My guess is if they did do a deep dive, it would probably be at best an annual basis type thing. So I like it as a set of guidelines. I like it as is, with the understanding that, of course, it could be modified. I mean, personally, I see a couple things I would have added or taken off in the sub-detail level. So I don't think that it's necessary to have discussion down to that level. And that would be something that the GA or the staff could decide to do.
So you
So I
you
do
would
like it
support-
as is, yes.
You would support an executive summary in the report?
Absolutely.
And then the inclusion of this with the
Yes.
modifications we've talked about? Okay.
Yes. However, I do agree with both Renee and Judy that if you did decide to do these things as written, it would be very expensive. And so I would assume that a phased approach would be something that the GA would probably want to do, or maybe just do priority one items, for this year and next year, with the idea that at some point we'll get to all of this, but obviously it's not something you could do at once. And then lastly, on the social media, since everybody seems to be discussing the social media part very heavily, I have no problem with the social media plan at all. My only caveat would be that, like Renee, I think that it would be a mistake to rely on volunteers for the point person for like social media and or the website. That it really would be better to have staff or a hired person to do that. And my reasoning has to do with continuity. People come and go, people get busy. Unfortunately, you rely on somebody who's a volunteer who's heavily competent, and then something comes up and they can no longer do it, and then you're left hanging. So that would be my only concern on the social media front.
Okay, let me clarify that. In writing, we have under item number 3C, assisted by a volunteer-based committee. That's for the assigned lead. Do you see that needs modification, or does that express what you're thinking?
It depends on how you have your volunteer-based committee or lead. If you have an assigned lead who's going to, it depends on what their roles and responsibilities are. I basically think that if you have somebody who's going to be, let's say, running your social media platform or monitoring it on a daily basis and is the one who's going to be really looking at it and monitoring it for activity, that person should not necessarily be a volunteer because they're familiar with it, they know what's going on. They would probably, after a certain amount of time, know who the people are who are commenting or asking questions. Then if that person leaves, because volunteers never last forever, you end up with a big gap, whereas if it was a paid position or responsibility of staff, if that staff person left, there would be training involved with the next person. You wouldn't just have somebody, decide to move out of town and they're gone.
So it depends on their interpretation of this, and that, of course,
Again, that would be something that the GA would have to decide amongst themselves.
and they always have that option with our recommendations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation. It's, something that they can take into consideration.
Well, I think that was something that, as I hit my hand, I think we had discussed that with the lead part. Dave and Wes both definitely brought that up with having staff or somebody, a paid position overseeing. as the oversight. The volunteers, of course, are not in charge of it, as volunteers never are. So that's kind of where that was going. I know it got a little mucky in that section, but I think that that was one of the things that we had discussed, was that top level would probably be staff in the end.
Okay, so I'm getting a sense that the committee would agree overall to a PAC report summary on the level of what we did last time, together with submission of this document with the modifications of adding the email database and capture the concerns and costs expressed. The committee I've got the sense that the majority of the committee would accept that approach with a clear expression of the concerns and costs as a part of the component of the scope of it. And I would capture that in the PAC report at the top, and the committee, if this were to become the committee report, is the modified version of the subcommittee report would be an addendum to it. So our primary recommendations would be the PAC report itself, and the secondary would be the attachment for clarity and more information as to what we thought was important in the priority order. Now, is that something we want to vote on, or we want to get a consensus? Just do we have a sense of consensus around that, or a modification of it?
No.
I would agree with you.
Okay, Judy?
No.
Other thoughts?
I think, we really have two things we're doing here. We're making a recommendation to the Groundwater Authority, and also we're preparing to rewrite the C&E plan. And so I'm comfortable with the idea that the C&E plan is maybe more comprehensive than we're going to do immediately. And we're going to watch the cost, and we're going to take a phased approach. And so I'm comfortable with a top-level summary, but making very clear that it's going to be a phased approach. We're going to watch the cost. And by the way, I would add also a glossary of terms. I think that was an excellent suggestion.
I got that.
Yeah, I didn't hear you say it, but
Yeah, let's start with what we know on the beginning, and then,
Yep.
as we firm up the rest,
Well, that was
simple to begin with.
Yeah, that's an expanded version of what we talked about for many of these sheets, having a clear definition of terms and references. I did write that down. So, okay, so perhaps, well, do we have any other hard feelings one way or the other?
I think it's a great report. I mean, you guys did a great job, I think.
Thank you, and on behalf of the committee, we'd like to open it for public comment at this time before we consider a vote. From the room first.
For the record, I'm Don Decker. I could talk to you guys for about an hour over the subject. Not sure what happened. The Domestic Well Owners Association sent out a monthly newsletter that was factual for years. And it's exactly what you're talking about, your blast effort. It is a huge amount of work, and the return in terms of education is questionable. And I won't say any more about that. The idea that you could use an existing GA website for your reference in your various documents, of course, is important, except that there's actually two websites. The GSP website is maintained by Stetson. It's not even linked to the GA website. It's a totally bizarre situation. It has never been linked. The GA website is not a site that has technical information. The GSP website has got basically data. There is virtually no explanations of what's there. You have to understand more than just basic hydrology to make any sense out of it. So in order to go any further here, it's not just a matter of writing some fact sheets that you guys conceivably could be involved in some of them. It goes way beyond that. The fundamental absence of the reference material that you're counting on, that has to be brought up to speed too. There's another problem here, and this is a serious issue with the lawsuits that are interlocking, tying up virtually everyone that's involved. The TAC itself, I'm the last standing TAC member. And the other members have withdrawn on advice of their legal counsel. I hope everybody realizes that. So where you're going to get the volunteer effort that you're talking about that's technically or politically competent to handle various writing tasks with the pending court issues and the discovery phases that every last one of them will have, those of us that have been volunteers have a really high likelihood of being called before the court. And we did all of our efforts as volunteers. You're not going to get any competent help volunteering under the present circumstances. I myself am thinking about literally backing away. The only person who is going to be qualified in the sense that they have some kind of backup is someone who is under the employ of a firm that's got a bond that will support them during these court issues. Everybody hear what I just said? That's the person that would be willing to step up to many of the tasks that you're talking about. As far as what volunteers might be able to do, the idea that they could go forth and present materials to various public agencies, or I don't mean agencies, I mean public gatherings, clubs, and so forth. The only way that would ever work is if you had a carefully screened, trained, capable small group that stuck with a set of view graphs, a set of slides that had been scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed. Back 50 years ago, I gave my first presentation on the water shortfall in the Indian Wells Valley to the Board of Realtors. And over the years, there have been many dozens of versions of that presentation. And I can tell you that in general, the message that would be appropriate under the present conditions is not a very pleasant one, and most people don't want to hear it. That's part of our problem. The outreach that you guys are trying to execute is admirable. The idea of bringing the public's level of understanding, and I might say our elected officials' understanding up to a higher level is it's admirable, and it's an important thing, but it's also virtually impossible, because once the recipient, the audience, has reached a point where they're frustrated or angry or just totally confused, it's almost impossible to actually provide any information to them and have it enter into their brain in a useful way. That's called turnoff. That's kind of where we're at. And the complications, Judy mentioned them with things that are going on, complications that have legal bearing. They're happening almost multiple times per month. And keeping up with that in a way that would be meaningful in the way of explanation is not possible. And the money aspect of what you're trying to do, you're talking here about professional help for every one of these tasks, at least at the very least, professional help. Stetson is essentially saturated at this point. Who's going to improve the GA website? The Stetson website, there have been a series of ad hoc committee meetings having to do with modeling that I am a member of, and had a conference call meeting this morning. And I had problems with the Stetson website. They have got some hacking prevention software built into it, and I have some on my own computer, and the two computers didn't like to talk to each other. So I spent my 2 hours without the benefit of being able to see the maps and graphic things that were part of the meeting. So the complications of what you guys are trying to do is, I'm not going to say it's overpowering, but I think you're way over-optimistic. And I'll stop.
Thanks, Don. We may be over-optimistic.
I think you're way over-optimistic.
And I resonate with some of your concerns. However, in my opinion, we should at least try and start on this task, because there is a need for a lot of this.
I've got over 2,000 volunteer professional hours in this GA business, and I would like to say that I can see benefit for things that I've done, and I can see some. But I think you're kidding yourselves. The concentration at this point by the GA board is on the litigation and the implications of it, and things like communicating with the public. They've been hammered on that for years, since the beginning.
And we'll see. We can only recommend what we can best recommend. And I know from my personal interface and my other position with the GA, there is an equal focus on the purchase of imported water and the conveyance of that water. So there are two things that are dominating.
Part of the
right
GA
now.
is concentrating on that. Part of it isn't. Judy brought that up. And I would like to recommend to you, and this is not just because Judy is a close relationship of mine, her trying to promote her effort to promote a simplified version, I think, will get you a lot further along with the board than this more complicated, thorough, and I grant you that it is just exactly what you've talked about, but I don't think the board is going to be very receptive to it. I think they'd be a lot more receptive to a very simplified version, and if you want to abstract that out of what you've got, maybe so.
And
I think you need to pay more attention to what Judy has got in her document, however. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
I have another comment. I'm still pushing for my simplified version. Take the website. It's less controversial than the POAM. Should the website be improved and made more community-friendly, one can always come back and look at your list and say, oh, you accomplished this. We think you should now try doing A, B, and C. And it would be a lot more positive and offer a constructive step up than giving a long list and having only one or two things be done in a given length of time, and then saying, well, gee, you did this and this, but look at all the things you didn't do. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes, I do, and that's why we proposed having the summary be the report. But we have the backup that provides the clarity and the additional level of detail, and they can accept or not accept.
They can, and they will. But you know, and you guys, I wrote on my very first paragraph is praising you for all your work you did. The details may change in a year. And they might not even be on your list for whatever reason.
Anything in the GSP, that is the case. And by the way, that's the last item that we have to consider as a part of this original task is what should be our update to this. There was a timeline requested on how regularly should we update this plan. And I think that can be a part of it, along with, remember, I'm going to express, I have proposed as chair summarizing what we've done is, and I'm going to capture a lot of these concerns that the committee as a whole and individual members have as individuals with the scope and the schedule and the costs. And then we're going to summarize it at the top level, but it's going to provide, if we attach this subcommittee report as a committee report, it's going to include the more detailed level behind it to what level they may or may not be able to achieve, but at least they have it for reference.
I respectfully ask that you attach my report also. And I would like to point out something. We've talked off and on about the legal issues that exist with all the lawsuits and the adjudication. And you have it down here because it's I can't turn my head and talk into this thing. It's in the GSP also, and that is the transient pool and fallowing program. And in particular, there was a great issue with the fallowing program because, in fact, there is no fallowing program. The use of the word fallowing is used incorrectly in agricultural terms in the GSP and by DWR, quite frankly. Should any of these lawsuits be settled while any of us are still alive, these things may go out the window.
And how do you suggest we plan for that?
I suggest we don't at this time. That's why I say take little steps. See how far we get. I mean, there's no big hammer hanging up there to say that in 6 months we can't look at what part of what the GA adopted and how far they've gotten with it and reevaluate things for them or for ourselves. So I guess I would stick with your executive summary and hold back the rest.
Other thoughts?
No, I'd say let's proceed on. Don Decker said something that resonated with me. He said the basic turnoff that the people here in this community have gotten from the GA. And I think I have a prime example of that for those of us who have been on this committee for a while. How many public members used to be in the audience when we had our meetings? 15 or 20, 30? Bunch. May I direct your view out there? How many do you see? I think that's a big bit. Enough said on that, you know. But I also agree with you, David, though, that I think we just go ahead and press on. Let's do it the way you're planning on it. And we'll, yeah, sure, is it going to be an effort and futility? Well, yeah, it might be. However, the work's been done. So let's get it recorded and documented, you know.
Does the subcommittee stand behind that?
I'm good with that. And, you know, in the back of our minds, we have to recall that we are also addressing the concern that DWR had with the C&E plan. And so it might make sense to be more complete and then have a very carefully crafted approach to these, kind of like what Judy said. Let's make it clear that these are our priority efforts. If we update the C&E plan and we have big gaps that we could have put in there, that's not going to bode well for the GA. So I think we proceed, but we need to be very careful with put in there the concerns that folks have made, and let's be sure that we simplify it enough that the main points come shining through in their priorities.
Yep. Okay, I kind of glossed over that. Yeah, the state, by the state, we're supposed to fix our C&E plan. Then therefore, we should do that.
And the C&E plan should be at a top level.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And we agree on that. So that's in essence capturing a part of, we're getting a three-phased approach to this. The C&E plan at the top level, the PAC report at the top level, and then the details supporting it with all the concerns expressed and to be modified as things progress would be the approach. So do we have a motion to that effect?
Can I make one comment? Or go ahead.
I
Renee.
need some clarification on what we're voting on.
We haven't made a motion yet.
Okay, but you had suggested some precursor statement regarding what
She's talking.
you were actually recommending. I remember, are you saying that you want to do an executive summary and then attach this report to it as a reference? So, and maybe you could refer to page, what, 1A, B, C, D, or whatever.
Renee, in essence, the PAC report serves as that summary, and it would be similar in length and complexity to what I presented in the PAC report at the last GA meeting. And then there would be reference to the subcommittee report, which would be attached to the PAC report. And if we want it, Judy's minority report could be attached to it if she still wishes that.
I do.
Does that help clarify?
Yeah, okay, so you're going to write a report similar to the PAC report you presented at the last meeting, and then you're going to attach the whole report.
Yeah, it's going to summarize at the top level the things and point out it will probably be a little bit bigger than the last report because it's going to put in all the concerns and that people have expressed here with the detail tasks in the sub-report relating to costs, staffing, time, et cetera, and potential for change, those kinds of things. So it will capture at the top level the summary of the committee report itself, and then the committee, whatever the committee vote is, and with reservations around these concerns, as well as a minority report. So do we have a motion?
I'll make a
How would we-
motion.
How do we word that motion?
I would like to word it as David just worded it.
And I will reference the videotape to do so.
Absolutely.
I rely on that videotape when I'm doing the PAC report, not just my memory and notes.
I'll second it. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Camille and Renee. Further discussion? Okay, we'll go to vote. David Janis, Chair. Thank you. Or aye. I'm sorry, my brain's mush. Renee Westalusk.
Aye.
Wes Katzenstein.
Aye, and thank you, David.
Lyle Fisher.
Aye.
Judy Decker.
No,
Camille Anderson.
Aye.
Tim Carroll.
Aye.
Regina Troglin.
Aye, and thank you, David.
You're welcome, and thank you, team. And thank you all for this. And with that, we will attach the minority report from Judy also.
would you please send us what?
We'll have
you-
it before the committee.
Before the GA meeting, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and with that, let me get back to the agenda here. Okay, so we've done A, B, and C. Now we want to discuss how we get the changes to the C&E plan. And I would suggest, in the interest of time and efficiency and getting completeness and plus any direction that we have out of the GA or response to the report next time, that we could bring back into discussion, that we take on board the proposed changes to the C&E plan itself, which we've already agreed would be at the top level, that the subcommittee maybe go off and look at that. And I think there's a willingness in the subcommittee. We worked together pretty well in light of this conversation and any direction from the Groundwater Authority or response from the Groundwater Authority Board itself, that we meet after the next Groundwater Authority meeting that subsequent week and see if we have recommendations that we can bring back to this committee for what changes would be needed to the C&E plan itself for the July meeting. And that would only give us a week. We would meet
Who's we?
the subcommittee.
Okay.
The subcommittee worked pretty well together, and I've explored this, and there seemed to be a willingness to continue this effort, and informed by the discussion here. And with regards to, as well, the 7 plans that we have said we would take a look at for the good things that were categories, et cetera, that were in them, as well as Regina's submission of a revised plan itself and the Owens Valley plan. Those were the subset that we would look at. Take that into account, take this report and the GA meeting into account, and bring back to the committee proposed changes that would be recommended to the C&E plan. And keep in mind that that's from the perspective of the task given to us by the DWR and recommended corrective action 1, which going back was focusing on the GSP implementation phase and focusing on the stakeholder groups, both previously identified and then special communities.
So are you saying that the subcommittee is going to meet and you guys are going to come up with some sort of draft plan that we're then going to look at before the meeting so
Yeah.
that we're prepared to
Well, and
discuss
that's
during the meeting?
And that's part of the. Well, I'm saying to do that after we hear the GA itself. The timeline is the GA meets 2 weeks from now,
Right.
and then the next PAC meeting would be the 2 weeks after that. And so
Correct.
we would have to meet in that first week and come to some level of agreement. And what I would say is we will try to come to some level of agreement on a draft, but absent the draft, we would recommend, if we were not able to get to a complete draft, that we at least get to, here's the areas that we want and issues that we want to focus on, that we propose amending the C&E plan for.
Okay,
And I'm
so
trying,
we
yeah.
will have something before the next.
Yeah, we will have, that's the intent, is we will have something. And part of the
I
reason
just
for.
wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, well, in the interest, I'm not willing to commit our,
You
knowing what- no-
hope to have something.
yes, well,
Well,
knowing.
because my suggestion is if we can't get something prior to that meeting, then maybe it's not necessarily a good idea to have that meeting.
I agree.
Because I don't think that all of us meeting together cold to look over a draft and just, we're just not going to get anywhere.
I agree 100% with you. And that's why I was thinking of what can we do for the time to get there. And knowing, again, the reason we've taken this task in a two-step format is the changing of the C&E plan is the task, the 5-year task that about 2.5 years remains. The meat of it is what needs to be done for C&E.
I would suggest if you get the draft done ahead of time and send it to us, that at our next meeting, we have a discussion about what you have written and not necessarily have a vote yet.
We can do that because the point is there is no urgent deadline for that task. And in fact, as we have said many times, the C&E and DWR implied, the GSP itself will change during this implementation period. And as those things change, communication may need to change. And we've talked about that tonight. In our inability to predict
Yes.
with 100% crystal ball the future, which none of us have on any topic, let alone water in this valley. So the intent would be that we arrive with at least a set of recommendations to discuss, if not an approved one. And if we don't have enough fleshed out in the committee and we realize that we're not going to get there from here, I'll be the first to cancel the next PAC meeting unless we get some urgent task from the Groundwater Authority itself. Because I too don't believe that's a productive use of our time nor the public's that is interested.
No, I think that would be a good idea. A week is quite a lot for us, the three of us, to absorb all the information that the GA is potentially going to throw at our heads.
And we
might be able to. I'm sure we might have something. But
at least we'll
like
have a
your
start.
idea.
We'll have I believe.
Yeah.
I believe we will get a start in a method of focusing ourselves, and maybe get a high sign or a modification from the rest of you at that meeting.
I would like to offer something right now. I read it a long time ago, but that was a long time ago. The Owens Valley GA plan. Owens Valley is a different type of community altogether than what we have in the Indian Wells Valley. I'm not saying there aren't things in there that wouldn't work, but I caution you when you look at these different plans to think about the political and the human makeup as well as the physical issues of each of those plans, because they're all totally different. And for instance, Camille really liked what Fox Canyon did, and I did too, actually. But you have to remember where Fox Canyon is and the population base that they deal with. It's huge. Whereas at the other end of the scale, you have Owens Valley, which is still, fortunately, a small community. Many of the people have known each other for years, maybe I could even say generations. So you have a different situation in methods of communication and in how you're going to do that.
Thank you, Judy.
I have a comment. If I understand it, we're going to meet after the GA board to start looking into how to rewrite the C&E plan. Is that right?
Yeah, and we'll tackle it somewhat the same way as, given what we've done so far, what are the areas that we want to take on?
Yeah, I would think the most we could hope for would be some kind of an overview approach, some suggested we write a new chapter, or, I don't see much hope that we're going to be rewriting it. And I don't think we should. But maybe just some alternatives.
May just be a supplement or an additional chapter. You covered it, and
Yeah,
will not
in other words-
presuppose what we're going to recommend.
Yeah. But we should just kind of say, here's, I think, the approach we should take for rewriting the C&E plan. And maybe just some alternatives and trade-offs but I think that maybe that's what you're saying all along, David. I don't know. But I think we don't want to, if we're going to rewrite the whole thing, we'll just have Regina do it.
I'll do it. That's fine.
I have something else to offer to you that should, of course, go to the board because they're the end vote. You can't undo what's already been done. It simply doesn't work. And Don has brought up over and over again the domestic well owner. These people are very independent. They most definitely do not want government snooping around their place on general principles. And many of them, as well as many of the agricultural people in this valley, have written off the GA. And I do not see any way in which to mend that bridge by the GA. If they do so, they are going to have to take extraordinary steps. What those would be, I have no idea. But many in the agricultural community have taken steps. It's called litigation. And at this point in time, with all the litigation and cross-litigation and however else lawyers make all their money, people are not going to say anything for fear of it compromising their position in litigation.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll get to member comments, individual member comments. Let's start with Renee.
I just want to clarify. So after the next GA meeting, the subcommittee's going to meet again, and you are only going to come up with recommendations, right, of what needs to be done to update the C&E plan and meet the standards of the recommendations that the DWR made, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you're not going to do any exact language or anything. How long is it going to take us to get to language and actually rewriting chapters and adding stuff?
Maybe the next meeting after that would be the intent.
Is this going to drag on for 6 months? That's what I want to know.
No.
Okay.
At least I wouldn't let it.
Okay,
But it's important to the task at hand because it is a recommended corrective action. But I believe we should attempt our best to get it right. And what we'll have next time, and it's limited by the time frame available, is our recommended way to, having gone through this level of engagement on it, what is our recommended changes that really need to be made to the C&E plan to document some of this or none of it?
Because I would say if we keep dragging this out and it lasts a whole year or longer, I don't know if we'll ever get it done. And I would rather get the recommendations met and get the plan, whatever, I know areas that were lacking compared to what all the other plans had. And I think we're going to have to add some things because our plan didn't have some of these things in here. And then we have to update methods and ways to outreach with the public that weren't in our plan before. And I would rather get that done sooner than later and turn it into Stetson to submit to the DWR rather than work on something and then it doesn't meet the standards and then it gets rejected again. I'd rather submit it sooner than later. And so if it has to be corrected again, we can do whatever's lacking.
Well, we should be there by 2 meetings from now, no later than. I share your concern, Renee.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's my comment for tonight.
Thanks, Renee. Tim?
No comment.
Regina?
Yeah. Been thinking this entire discussion throughout this evening, it's one of those things where for somebody in my grouping, one thing that I didn't hear in contention to the social media was a backup plan of how to engage with the 17 to 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds. This community is extremely diverse, whether it be in race, ecological or economic backgrounds, and age ranges, depending on which town you're in. Trona in particular is extremely diverse in all of those areas. When we look at these engagement things, those need to be kept in mind. That although, yes, the GA board has put a pretty nasty taste in some people's mouths, especially those in my age demographic. Many who are in their 30s, first-time homeowners, young parents, are extremely angry. And sometimes you're right, they do not want to listen. However, that doesn't negate the GA's responsibility to engage and to communicate with them just like they do anybody else. Majority of those in my age demographic, in my daughter's demographic, don't read the newspaper. Although I get the newspaper on my phone, I'm an oldie when it comes to that kind of stuff because I like reading actual written language. But not everybody does. My daughter intakes her news at the age of 10 via short form videos done by news organizations or by some lunatic on the YouTube. So, everybody's going to intake information differently. And while cost can be prohibitive in some things, engaging with the younger populations is necessary. It is extremely vital to get them on board just as much as it is to get the olders on board. Because if the youngers aren't on board, in 20 years, we're going to be right back here. Or rather, I may be right back here, sitting here having the same argument with the next group who's incoming because the engagement now wasn't enough. Because they didn't understand the now. Dave's made great points, and so has Wes, and others have made the comment of being an engaged citizen, and that is something that they should all do. However, civics has been lacking in schools. We all know that. So you can't always count on them being informed. Some people are new to the area. Maybe they're from out of state. I engage with several who just moved here from out of state, who have no idea that California has had these water issues going on because they've never dealt with it in their life. Or they're from a big city like LA and they move up here and they don't know. They've heard rumors, but they've never had to engage on this kind of level, where they're being given an opportunity to step up and step forward. And if we don't give them that opportunity, I think we're doing a huge disservice to our younger generations that are going to end up in our positions one day. So that's my comment. Just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Regina. Wow.
Yeah, I don't have anything further.
Judy?
Well, actually, I'd like to respond a bit to Regina. I believe it was Lyle has said this repeatedly. The public also, and so has David, the public has a responsibility to be informed. So while that doesn't seem to be a prominent attribute right now with people, when they are engaged in this water issue, they need to be taught to take their responsibility to find out what is going on in their community. Other than that, I'm done.
Thanks. West?
Yeah, just two quick thoughts. You know, when we wrote the C&E plan originally, you know, I said, somebody handed us a dirty end of a stick, you know, and let's get this sucker done. And thank God for Lorelei. She helped us. And then the stick came back, and the end's just as dirty. It's even dirtier, you know. But dirty end of the stick is where the action is a lot of times. And so let's enjoy it, I guess.
I'm having trouble with the visual here.
But I will say we do have a remarkably complete dialogue in these meetings. And I think that's a benefit. And I think we all feel very empowered to talk, and that's good. All the ideas are on the table, and let's rock and roll. And I'll be curious to see what Carol has to say, too, as it going around the table.
Camille? Thanks, Wes.
I have nothing to add.
No more about sticks? John? And Carol, any closing thoughts from you?
You know, again, I want to say thank you all. I so appreciate all the work that you put into this, all of the thought, all of the amazing suggestions. You've done a phenomenal job, and you continue to do that. And I definitely appreciate all of the work, and I'm going to be working hard to try to put as much of it as feasible into effect, you know, of course, with the board's direction and concurrence. You know, I agree with the comments, and yes, you know, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of misinformation. There's just, that's why we need to do this. That's why it's so important for there to be a communication and engagement plan, and more importantly, that's why it's important for us to actually implement it. So the help that you're providing the Groundwater Authority and your ideas, your suggestions, the content, it's so valuable to this effort. And we're going to do our best to get as much of this information out there as we can. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Carol. We appreciate the thought on behalf of the committee. And I would like to reemphasize what Wes said about the committee freeing us to speak and agree and disagree. And we've come a long way. Just take a look back. You know, a year, 2 years ago, we weren't able to get to votes, let alone close to consensus or achieving a majority view. And we're getting there now, and we're comfortable with each other, we're knowledgeable. We've got a couple vacancies on this committee that I brought up to the Groundwater Authority that we would like to see augmented. But this is a good group that works together pretty well. Unfortunately, the TAC has, under the, not necessarily the threat of litigation, but as a result of litigation, has ended up much smaller. And it still serves an urgent purpose. And I would remind this group, and the Groundwater Authority staff asked me to remind us of our responsibility in this. TAC members are nominated not only by the GA board itself, but they are can be nominated by PAC members representing our stakeholder groups. And we've said this in here before, and I would hope, notwithstanding some of the valid concerns and perhaps overstated in other way concerns, because there's disagreements that Don presented, some of the issues, there is a value to serving your community and the Groundwater Authority in something like this. And I would ask us to think and perhaps solicit someone we know that might qualify for this, or either if they're not a constituent of theirs and the stakeholders that we represent, recommend their name to the board or to me, and I'll forward it to the board, because the board can't appoint outside of us or nominate outside of us and subsequently the board itself appoints. And we need more eyes and qualified representatives on the TAC moving forward for this. And with that in mind, I'll read a sentence from the bylaws about the qualifications for TAC member. We don't have to have any technical background, we policy committee members, but the TAC, this is a quote, members of the TAC must have a formal education and experience in a groundwater-related field and an understanding of the technical aspects of the basin or similar groundwater basins in California. And so think about that. Run through your mind your friends or your enemies or folks you respect that you think could play and would be interested in this committee or the TAC. And please, if you have a name or someone, forward them along with, maybe a minor version of a resume or a curriculum vitae of how they would be interested and what their qualifications would be to serve on it. Because one of the strengths of our groundwater authority organization and community over the last 4 years has been the TAC and the strength of the TAC. And I know almost every member of this committee used to go to all the TAC meetings, the full TAC meetings prior to our meeting. And that was one way we kept informed at the highest levels of what the underpinnings of the groundwater situation and the needs were in the valley. So put that in your responsibility bag in the back of your mind, and if you have names, please move forward with them. Thank you very much. Without further comment, we'll adjourn for the evening.